Daniel Reyes had been folding laundry every Sunday for 15 years. It was a small ritual he never thought much about. He would sit on the living room couch with a basket of warm clothes beside him, the television playing some game in the background, and his hands would move on their own, folding shirts, matching socks, smoothing out wrinkles in his daughter's school uniforms. It was a quiet, comfortable part of his week, something he did without really thinking. But on one particular Sunday afternoon, something made him stop. He picked up a pair of his wife's underwear from the basket and noticed a small, dark mark near the waistband. At first, he thought it was just a stain, maybe from the wash, maybe from something that had bled color onto the fabric. But when he looked closer, he saw that it wasn't a stain at all. It was a burn. The fabric was scorched, slightly hardened, with a faint brown ring around the edges, as if something hot had pressed against it. Daniel sat very still, turning the fabric over in his hands. His mind began searching for an explanation. Marisol, his wife, did not iron her underwear. She did not smoke. There was no candle or hot iron anywhere near where she kept her clothes. He could not think of a single normal reason for a burn mark like this to appear. He told himself it was probably nothing. Maybe it happened at the laundromat. Maybe a machine malfunctioned. Maybe it was an old pair of underwear he had simply never noticed before. He folded it carefully and set it aside, trying to push the thought out of his mind. But the thought did not leave him. It stayed with him through dinner that night, through the hours he lay awake next to Marisol, listening to her breathing, wondering what she might be hiding from him. Daniel and Marisol had been married for 15 years. They had 2 children, a teenage daughter named Sophia and a younger son named Mateo. Their marriage was not perfect, but it was steady. They argued sometimes about small things, money, schedules, whose turn it was to drive the kids to practice. But they had never had any serious problems. Daniel had always believed Marisol was honest with him, that there were no secrets between them. Now, for the first time in 15 years, he found himself doubting that. Over the next few days, Daniel began to notice small things he had never paid attention to before. Marisol started taking her phone with her everywhere, even into the bathroom. She seemed distracted at the dinner table, picking at her food instead of eating, her eyes staring at something far away. Once, when he walked into the bedroom quietly, she jumped, startled, and quickly closed the laptop she had been looking at. Each small detail, on its own, meant nothing, but together, they began to form a picture in Daniel's mind, a picture he did not want to see. He thought about an affair. He thought about secrets. He thought about all the ways a marriage could quietly fall apart without anyone saying a word. He did not say anything to Marisol about the burn mark right away. He told himself he needed to be sure before he said anything that could not be taken back. So he watched her, carefully, the way you watch someone when you are afraid of what you might find. He noticed she had started leaving the house in the middle of the day, telling him she was running errands. When he asked what kind of errands, she would give vague answers. Just things for the house, she would say, or, I had to pick something up for work. Daniel had never questioned these answers before. Now, every word felt like it might be hiding something bigger. One evening, about 4 days after he found the burn mark, Daniel could not stay quiet any longer. He waited until the children were asleep, and then he sat down at the kitchen table and asked Marisol to join him. She came in, drying her hands on a kitchen towel, her face calm, not expecting anything unusual. Daniel reached into a drawer where he had hidden the underwear and placed it on the table between them. I found this in the laundry, he said quietly. There's a burn mark on it. I don't understand how it got there. Marisol looked down at the fabric, and Daniel watched her face change. The calm expression she had worn just a moment before disappeared. Her shoulders dropped, and for a long moment, she said nothing at all. Daniel felt his stomach tighten, certain now that something was very wrong. Marisol, he said, his voice softer now. Please, just tell me what's going on. I need to know. She looked up at him, and he saw that her eyes were full of tears. I didn't want you to find out like this, she said. I didn't want you to find out at all, not yet. Not until I knew everything would be okay. Daniel felt his heart pounding. He braced himself for whatever she was about to say. Marisol took a deep breath and began to explain. A few months earlier, during a routine checkup, her doctor had found something unusual during an exam. Further tests showed early changes in her cervical cells, the kind of changes that doctors take seriously, but that are often very treatable if caught early. Her doctor had recommended a procedure to remove the abnormal tissue before it could develop into something more serious. The procedure, she explained, involved a type of treatment that used controlled heat to remove the affected cells. It was a common and safe procedure, but it sometimes caused minor burns on nearby fabric if she was not careful about changing her clothes right after an appointment. That was how the mark had gotten onto her underwear. She had been in a hurry one day, rushing to pick up Mateo from school, and had not noticed the damage until it was too late to do anything about it. Daniel sat in stunned silence, trying to process what he was hearing. The fear of betrayal that had been building inside him for days began to dissolve, replaced by a different kind of fear, one for Marisol's health and safety. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Why would you go through something like this alone?" Marisol wiped her eyes and tried to explain. She told him that when she first got the news, she had been terrified, not just of the diagnosis itself, but of how it might change things. She worried about frightening Sofia and Mateo. She worried about how Daniel might look at her differently, whether he would see her as fragile, as someone he needed to protect rather than his equal partner. She had convinced herself that the best thing to do was to handle it quietly, to get through the appointments and the treatment on her own, and only tell her family once she had good news to share. "I didn't want to worry everyone before I knew what was really happening," she said. "I thought if I could just get through it myself, then I could come to you with an answer instead of just fear." She told him about the appointments she had been attending during her lunch breaks, slipping away from work without telling anyone where she was really going. She told him about the nights she had lain awake, frightened, while pretending everything was normal so the children would not sense that anything was wrong. She told him about the long drives home from the clinic, crying alone in the car so that no one would see her tears. Daniel listened to all of it, his anger and suspicion completely gone now, replaced by a deep ache for everything she had been carrying by herself. He reached across the table and took her hand. "You should have told me," he said gently. "I'm your husband. You don't have to go through things like this alone. That's not what we promised each other." Marisol nodded, tears falling freely now. "I know. I'm sorry. I just didn't know how to say it without everything falling apart." For a long time, they sat together at the kitchen table, holding hands, neither of them saying much. The silence between them felt different now than it had over the past few days. It was no longer filled with suspicion and fear of the unknown. Instead, it was filled with relief, sadness, and a quiet kind of closeness that comes after finally telling the truth. In the days that followed, Daniel made a decision. He would not let Marisol face the rest of her treatment alone. He went with her to her next appointment, sitting beside her in the waiting room, holding her hand while they waited to be called. The doctor explained the procedure in detail, answering every question Daniel had, putting both of their minds at ease about what to expect. Over the following weeks, Daniel made sure he was present for every step of the process. He learned about the treatment schedule, helped Marisol track her appointments, and made small adjustments at home so she could rest when she needed to. He took over more of the household responsibilities, picking up the children from school, handling dinner some nights so Marisol could lie down after a long day. Sofia, their teenage daughter, eventually noticed that something was different in the house. She asked her parents directly one evening why her mother seemed tired so often, and why her father had suddenly started doing more around the house. Marisol and Daniel decided together that it was time to tell her the truth, in simple and reassuring terms. They explained that Marisol had a health issue that doctors were treating, that it was something many women experience, and that the doctors expected everything to turn out well. Sofia listened carefully, and though she was worried, she appreciated being told the truth, rather than being left to wonder on her own. As the weeks passed, Marisol's treatment continued, and slowly, the family settled into a new rhythm. There were difficult days when Marisol felt discouraged or exhausted, and days when Daniel struggled with his own fear about what the future might hold. But they faced each of those days together now, rather than separately. Finally, after several months, Marisol returned from what she hoped would be her final follow-up appointment. Daniel was waiting at home, trying to focus on making dinner, but unable to stop glancing at the door every few minutes. When Marisol walked in, he saw the expression on her face before she even said a word, and he knew immediately that the news was good. "They said everything looks clear," she told him, smiling for the first time in what felt like a long while. "The treatment worked. I just need regular checkups from now on, but they're not worried anymore." Daniel pulled her into a tight embrace, relief washing over him. The months of fear, confusion, and uncertainty melted away in that moment, replaced by gratitude for the health they had almost taken for granted, and for the honesty they had finally found with each other. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Daniel and Marisol sat together on the back porch, looking up at the stars. Daniel thought back to that Sunday afternoon when he had first noticed the burn mark on her underwear, how quickly his mind had jumped to the worst possible explanation, how close he had come to assuming the worst about the woman he loved. "I'm sorry I doubted you," he said quietly. "I should have just asked you sooner, instead of imagining all those terrible things." Marisol squeezed his hand. "And I'm sorry I tried to handle it all by myself. I thought I was protecting you, protecting all of us, but really, I was just making things harder." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that no longer carried any hidden fears or unspoken doubts. In the months that followed, their marriage felt different, stronger, in a way that was hard to put into words. They had learned, through fear and through honesty, that secrets, even ones meant to protect the people you love, often do more harm than good. They had learned that real partnership means facing hard things together, not carrying them alone out of fear of how the other person might react. What had started as a small, confusing discovery in a basket of laundry had become, in the end, one of the most important turning points in their marriage. It taught them both that love is not just about sharing the easy moments, the celebrations and the good news. It is also about being brave enough to share the frightening moments, the uncertain ones, the ones where you do not yet know how the story will end. Daniel never looked at laundry day the same way again. Each Sunday, as he folded their clothes, he thought about how something as small as a burn mark had nearly driven a wedge between him and the person he loved most, and how, in the end, it had brought them closer together than ever before.